So in this video, I'm going to go over the other semester exam review that I put on my e-class, just for you guys to get some additional practice. I'm going to talk you through it and show you how to do each of the problems. I know that the practice review did that as well, but some of y'all probably had a little more difficulty understanding that, so I'm going to go over it here. The first question was find the volume of the figure below. Well, obviously the first thing you have to do is determine what is the figure. So it's a pyramid. So our formula on the formula sheet for the pyramid is volume, the base times the height. You have to figure out what is the base. So the base here, I noticed, is a rectangle. So to find the area of the base, we're going to do the length times the width. Then we're going to put that on top and multiply that times the height. So we're going to do length times width times height. So that's going to be 32 times 17.5 times 24. And we're going to divide all that by 3, and that gives us 13,340 divided by 3, which gives us a total volume of the pyramid of 4,480 feet cubed. And again, it's cubed because it's a three-dimensional object. Number 2 says in the diagram below, circle O is inscribed in square ABCD. The square has an area of 324. What is the area of the circle? So we need to notice a couple things. It's talking about a circle inscribed inside a square. We have the area of the square. Well, what is the area of a square? It is the side squared. So we can then put this area 324 in for that area of the square right there. In the formula, area equals side squared. And then we can just take the square root of both sides and we can find out what a side is. So that means that any one of these sides, DC, AB, AD, BC, any of these sides is 18. Then we need to talk about what do we need to find, what do we need to have for the area of a circle? Well, that is pi r squared. That is the formula for the area of a circle. So we don't have r right now. We do have d because the diameter is equal to the side. The diameter of the circle, right here, that would be going through the center here or through the center there, is the same as the length of a side. So diameter is equal to 2 times r, so we know the diameter is 18 because a side is 18. Then we're going to divide both of these sides by 2, and that gives us 9 for the radius. So then when we're looking for the area of the circle, we're going to have the area of the circle is pi r squared. So that's just going to be 9 squared times pi, which is 81 pi. As you're working through this video, if you need to pause it, write some stuff down, you need to do that, okay? So number 3, the attic of the building shown below is the shape of a half cylinder. The width of the diameter is 22 feet and its length is 74 feet. What is the volume of the attic? Okay, so now once again, it says this is a cylinder, only it's half of it. So what we need to do is find the volume of a cylinder, which is pi r squared h, and it's pi r squared because this circle, this down here would typically be a whole circle, right? And we only have half the circle, so we're going to end up dividing that by 2, and then our height is going to be our length here, right? So what we're going to do is we're first going to take our width here, which it says is 22. It's also our diameter, right? And we have to, again, get r up here. So we got to divide that 22 by 2 because our diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. So our radius is 11. So now all we need now is to plug in our r up here where r squared goes, our h for our length, which is 74. And then we're going to divide all of that by 2. So when we do that, we get 28,129.82. We're going to divide that by 2, and that gives us 14,064.9. And again, this will be feet cubed because it's volume. Number 4, the right circular cylinder and the right rectangular prism have the same heights and the same base areas. A plane parallel to the bases slices the two solids. If the rectangular cross section has a base length of 22 inches and a width of 9 pi inches, what is the radius of the cylinder's cross section? Well, we notice here that these two shapes have the same height. So what we're really talking about is this yellow part right here is the same area. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the volume of the cylinder equal to the volume of the prism. When we do that, notice that we have the height on both sides here. We have pi r squared h, and then we have length times width times height. So the h is going to cancel out on both sides. So then what we're doing is we're looking for what is the length and the width of the base over here. And we were given that the length was 22 and the width was 9 pi. Well, now you should notice that we have pi on both sides of the equal sign. So once again, those can cancel out. Then we're just going to take the square root of the r squared. And by the way, to get this 198, I just multiply 22 times 9. And that, when we take the square root of both sides, the r squared and the 198, we get that r, or the radius, is equal to 14.1. Number 5. We're given an equation and it says to find the center and the radius of the circle. So this time what I like to do with these is I use the equation of the circle to solve this. That would be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. This formula is on your formula sheet. Just recall that h and k are the center and r is the radius, okay? Very important that you remember that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to group these x's, the x squared and the negative 24x in one set of parentheses, the y squared and the 16y in another set of parentheses, and we're going to move this negative 3 to the other side of the equal sign. We're going to do all of that in one step, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to divide this middle coefficient right here, this negative 24, by 2. And we're going to put it in a set of parentheses where we have x minus the 12 squared. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to divide the 16 by 2. That's how we get the positive 8 here. And that should be a squared right there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to square this negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 12 is 144. We're going to put it back up here. We're going to square this 8. 8 times 8 is 64. We're going to put it right up there. Now remember, whatever we add to the left, we have to add to the right. So I'm going to add them to the right here. The 144 and the 64. You can do it up here as well. And then what we need to do is combine these three terms. So when we do that, we get x minus 12 squared plus y plus 8 squared is equal to 211. Now we need to go back up here and look at this equation of a circle. Our h is going to be our x value of our center. Our k is going to be our y value of our center. And then we're going to take the square root of whatever number's over here, because this is r squared, to get our radius, okay? So remember always that this is a minus sign and that's a minus sign, so that means that's going to be a positive 12. This is a minus sign, but that's a plus sign, so that means that's going to be a negative 8. So our center is going to be 12, negative 8. Just remember, you're always going to change the signs when you pull the numbers. And then you're going to take the square root of whatever that r squared is to get your radius. This problem, we have a tangent and we have a secant. It says solve for x, assume that the lines that appear tangent are tangent. So when we do this one, we first need to remember what our formula is, and this one's not on the formula sheet. It's going to be tangent squared is equal to outside times whole. So our tangent is here, so we're going to do 10 squared. Our outside is 5, our whole is 5 plus x. So we're going to go ahead and square that 10, that's 100, and we're going to multiply 5 times 5, that gives us 25, and 5 times x is 5x. Now we're going to subtract the 25 from both sides, and then we're going to divide by the 5. That gives us that x is equal to 15. And remember, the way you can check this is to go ahead and put it back up in there. So we've got 5, this is 100 over here. Well, whatever we do here when we multiply, it should be 100 as well. So 5 times 5 plus 15, which would be 20, 5 times 20 is also 100. So that's a great way to check your answer. This one says to find CE. So on this one, we have two chords that are intersecting inside the circle. So we're going to take the parts of each of the chords and we're going to multiply them. So we're going to multiply BF times FD. And we're going to set it equal to CF times FE. So part times part equals part times part. So again, we're going to take the 8 times the 2x plus 1. We're going to set it equal to that 10 times the 2x. This would be 8 times 2x would be 16, and 8 times 1 is 8. And then we got 10 times 2x, which would be 20x. We're going to subtract the 16x from both sides. That gives us 4x. We're going to divide the 4 into the 8. That gives us 2. Now, this is not the answer. It's asking us to find CE. So we're looking for this whole chord right here. So that means we got to put this 2 back in right there. And then we got to add the 10 to the 2 times 2. So that's what we're going to do. CE is 10 plus 2x. So we're going to do 10 plus 2 times 2. So that's actually going to be 10 plus 4, which means our CE, this length right here, is 14. So when you're doing these problems on the test, make sure you are reading the questions and answering the questions that's being asked. So this one says, find the measure of the angle indicated with the question mark. Well, here's our question mark. And then we have this 29-degree angle. Well, what I want you to notice is, notice this diameter right here. So if we have a diameter in a circle, then we know that this right here, CFE, is 180 degrees because it's half the circle, right? Okay, so that's the first thing I want you guys to notice, that arc GFE is 180 degrees. Then we know that this angle, GBF, this 29-degree angle, maps to arc GF. Well, you should recall that the arc is twice the inscribed angle. GBF is an inscribed angle because its vertex is on the circle. This arc right here, GF, is 2 times that angle. So arc GF is equal to 2 times the measure of GBF, right? So we're going to multiply that times 2, and that's going to tell us that this arc right here, GF, is 58. Well, we know that GFE is 180, so now can't we just subtract this 58 from the 180 to find out what arc FE is? You got it. Yes, we can. So we're going to subtract, we're going to find this arc right here because that's going to help us find that angle. Because remember, we know that this arc is 2 times that angle. So if we can find this arc, we can find that angle, okay? So we're going to subtract the 58 from the 180. That gives us 122. So recall again that FE, arc FE, is 2 times that angle. So what do we need to do to find the angle if we have the arc? Yes, divide it by 2. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to find angle FGE, which is our question mark, we're going to divide that arc that it maps to. This is an inscribed angle again, remember. So there's our angle. This is the arc that it maps to. We're going to divide this arc by 2. So that's going to be 122 divided by 2, which is 61 degrees. And I want you guys to notice that if you add 61 to 29, it equals 90. So again, if we have 2 angles, this angle and this angle up here, when you add those 2 arcs together, they map to, they equal 180. So that means that these 2 angles, when they are added together, have to. So number 9 says find the measure of the angle indicated with the question mark, and actually it's X in this one. We are going to, the way we find this angle is to do the outside arc minus the inside arc divided by 2. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to find the measure of angle QRS by taking arc QT and subtracting from it QS and dividing it by 2. So we're going to take the 156 minus the 64 divided by 2. That gives us 92 divided by 2, which is 46 degrees. And that would be our X or our question mark, whichever way it appears. Number 10 says find the arc length when the radius is 10 and the central angle is 120. Arc length, that formula is on the formula sheet, and that would be pi r squared theta over 360. Theta is always the angle measure. So we have the central angle measure of 120 here. That's what's going to go in for theta. We have 10 here. That is our radius. That's going to go in for our r. So what we're going to do is then just put those numbers in our formula. 10 squared times 120. So this is going to be 37,699.1 divided by 360. So our answer here would be 104.7. And again, if there's no pi in the answer, y'all, you got to make sure you multiply by that pi. Don't forget that. Number 11 says find the length of the segment indicated by the X. Well, when I look at this drawing, first thing I notice is that this is a radius and that this is a radius. So both of and this is a radius, right? We got the 19 here, so I could have said that this is 19, but I for sure know that that's 19. I also know that when I have a radius and a chord that intersect at a right angle, that radius bisects the chord. So we know that both of these lengths are 16. So the radius bisects the chord because it's perpendicular to the chord, right? Radius is perpendicular. That's what that right angle tells us. So we also should see here that we have a right triangle, right? You guys see this right triangle right here and right here? So we're going to use Pythagorean's theorem to solve this, and that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Recall that c is our hypotenuse, right? So This is our C right here, so that's where we're going to put our 19. And then this 16 is just one of the legs, and the x is one of the legs. So that's what I'm going to do. 16 squared plus x squared equals 19 squared. So that's 256 plus x squared equals 361. When we get down here to this point, we're going to subtract the 256 from the 361. And then we're going to take the square root of both sides. That gives us 10.2 for our x. This says find the correct values for x and y. So it says when a quadrilateral is inscribed inside a circle, we know that opposite angles are supplementary. So we know that x plus p is 180. We know that angle w plus angle y is 180, right? So what I'm going to do is we're given some values here for a, b, c, and d. So I'm just going to start plugging in these values and see which one gives me a value of 180 when I add them together. So I'm just going to add x and angle x and p here. So that's 2x plus 7y minus 3. That should equal 180. So now I'm just going to put this 15 and this 15 in here for the x and the y. When I do that for a, excuse me, I get 345 plus 105. Well, I already know that this is not going to be 180 degrees, but I'm going to keep going. So then I'm going to do b up here. Same thing. 23 times 13 plus 7 times 14 minus 3. I'm pretty sure this isn't going to be it either, and it's not. 395 definitely does not equal 180. Let's try C up here, 4 and 13. So 23 times 4 plus 7 times 13, that's going to be 92 plus 91. Looks like this one might be our answer because that's 183 minus 3 is 180. There we go. So all I did was plug in the values for x and y and see which one gave me the correct answer where when I add the opposite angles together, it equals 180. So number 13 is a directed line segment. In this formula, both of these formulas are on your formula sheet. I'm going to show you both ways to do this. It says find the point that the segment divides the segment into a ratio of 1 to 3. So the first formula on y'all's formula sheet absolutely is the ratio formula. So it says a is equal to 1, b is equal to 3. We know that x1 is negative 3, y1 7, x2 5, y2 negative 9, right? So then we're just plugging that stuff into the formula. Remember, you got to use PEMDAS here. So you're going to multiply, multiply, add, multiply, multiply, add. Remember, we're solving for an x and a y value here. So that gives negative 9 plus 5. 21 minus 9. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. Okay, so that's one way to do the problem. Now, you can use this other formula, and actually, guys, I prefer this one because I think there's a lot less room for error. So here again, I'm going to plug in my x1, which we already talked about what x1, y1, x2, y2 were. The only difference here is now we're going to put a there and a plus b down here. So when we populate this formula, we're going to get 1 over 1 plus 3, okay? Again, just put everything into where it goes. Now when I do this, and remember too that when you're subtracting a negative, it becomes a positive. So this is going to end up being 5 plus 3, right? This is all negative 16. When we do this, we can multiply across the top. So that's 8 divided by 4. This is going to be negative 16 divided by 4. And so our answer here is going to be negative 3 plus 2. Right? Because 8 divided by 4 is 2. 7 minus 4, because negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4. So that's negative 3 plus 2. That's going to give us our negative 1. This is 7 minus 4, which is going to give us 3. So we got the same answer no matter which formula we use. And I don't really care which formula y'all use. Just use the one that you feel like you're least likely to make errors on. Then we're going to find the perimeter of WXY. So this is obviously a triangle. So what we got to do is find the sides WX, XY, and WY. And you could draw this triangle if that helps you, and just label the points. But we got to find the length of WX. We're going to use the distance formula to do that. Just populate again. You got your X1, Y1, X2, Y2. This is the distance formula, guys. So plug it in there. You get square root of 16, that's 4 for WX. Then we got to find XY. So to do that, again, we're doing X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Plugging those into the distance formula. On this one, we get that XY is 8. And then we got to find the length of WY. So when we do that, again, we're going to do x1, y1, x2, y2 here. Populate that, and that gives us the square root of 80, which is 8.9. Now remember, what perimeter means is the length around an object, or the distance around an object. So we're just going to add now these three lengths together to get our perimeter. So that's going to be 4 plus 8 plus 8.9, and that's 20.9. Number 15 says, determine whether parallelogram WXYZ with the vertices, and it gives them to you, is a rectangle, rhombus, square, or just a parallelogram. Okay, so what I need to do is I'm going to determine whether something's a rectangle, I determine if the diagonals are congruent. Okay, so WXYZ, WX would be a side, XY would be a side, WY would be a side, and WZ would be a side. But I also know that every other letter, WY and XZ, would be the diagonals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the length of the diagonals by using the distance formula. So that's my first step. So WY is the square root of 125. Now I could solve this, but at this point I'm just trying to see if they're the same length. So then I'm going to compare that with XZ right here. So again, if it helps you draw this WXYZ and figure out what the diagonals are. Again, we're going to plug those values in, and we're going to find out what the length of XC is. Well, both of these are the square root of 125, so because the diagonals are congruent, I can say that this is a rectangle. Okay. Now, if it's a rectangle and a rhombus, then we would say that it is a square. So what I want to do now is I want to compare the diagonals and see if they have negative reciprocal slopes or if they are perpendicular. Okay. So I'm going to compare the slopes of, again, our WY and our XZ. So when I put in, again, our points for WY, I get this, the slope of WY was negative 1/2. Well, if this was perpendicular, our other slope of XZ would be 2, positive 2. Because remember, if things are perpendicular, then they have negative reciprocal slopes. That means they flip and they change sides. So when we find this one, it's actually 5.5. So it is positive, but it was not 2. It was actually 5.5. So we know that the diagonals are not perpendicular, right? So it's not a rhombus. So this is just a rectangle. These are the ways you need. Now, if something was, if we did this and we found that they were perpendicular, then we could say it's a rhombus. If it's a rhombus and a rectangle, then we know it's a square. So this is the quickest way to do this problem, y'all. Okay? Then 16 says you can fit 20 people in a 25 by 4 square foot area. Using this ratio, how many people can you fit in a 500 by 55 square? So this is people over area is equal to people over area. So we're going to take our 20 and put it where our people are. We're going to pick our 25 over 4 and put it where our area is. And do the same thing down here, only we're going to solve for the people up here. So we're going to do 20 over 25 times 4 equals x over 500 times 55. That's 20 over 100 equals x over 500 times 55. Cross multiply. I'm sure you guys remember how to do this, okay? And so when we do that, we get 100x equals 550,000. Divide both sides by 100, we get 5,500. So again, this is the way you set this up. People over area equals people over area, okay? The next one is a two-way table. It says the table shows the distribution of shoe sales at Archer High School among athletes. So we can tell that there were 500 athletes that were polled, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to answer these questions. It says, given that the person has Nike, what is the probability that the shoes are red? So that means we're talking about this column right here, the Nikes, right? So we're going to take this total of those that had Nike, because that's our given piece, and then we're going to figure out how many of those are red. So we're going to do the 52 over the 185. That's 28.1. Our next question says, given that a person has black shoes, what is the probability that they are Under Armour? So black shoes, that's this row right here. Y'all see that? So that's what we're talking about this time. So we're going to take this total now, 135, and we're going to figure out how many Under Armours was it? 51. So we're going to take the 51 over the 135 and that gives us 37.8%. So our given tells us which column or row we're talking about, and we're talking about the total, and then what in that column or row do we want. That's what we're going to do here in these types of problems. So number 18 says a bowl contains 8 red grapes and 9 green grapes. You randomly select one piece of fruit and eat it. Then you randomly select another piece of fruit. Find the probability of green and green. Recall that when we have this symbol here, we're talking about multiplication. So the very first thing that we need to do is find out how many grapes are we talking about. So we're going to add this 8 to this 9. Find out the total grapes. That's 17. Then it says, what is the probability that you randomly select one piece of fruit, eat it, then randomly select another piece of fruit. So if we're eating it, it's not going to go back in the group, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take our first red-green grape and over the total grapes, and then we're going to take the green grapes that are left over the total grapes left, okay? So that means we're going to do 9 over 17 because that's what we started with, 9 green grapes, right? But if I took one out and ate it, I only have 8 green grapes left, and I only have a total of 16 grapes left, right? So then we multiply across the top and across the bottom. Recall, we need to simplify this if it's in fraction form, or it's 26.5%, okay? So our next one says the cooler has cold drinks in it. 5 water, 6 Gatorades, 4 Cokes, 5 Sprites. You just stick your hand in the cooler and pull out one drink. What is the probability you get a Coke or a Sprite? So once again, notice here that this is our or symbol. This means we're going to add, and if there's overlap, we're going to subtract, right? So again, we got to figure out how many total drinks do we have. So we're going to add the 5 and the 6 and the 4 and the 5 together. That gives us 20. Then we want to know how many of them were Cokes. Well, you know what, before we go on to that, let's talk about whether this going to be a mutually exclusive or inclusive. It says you pull out one drink. So is there going to be any overlap if you're only pulling out one drink? No, you're right. So all you need to do here is this is going to be a mutually exclusive problem. So we just have to figure out how many Cokes there were and put it over the total. And then add to it how many Sprites there were and put it over the total. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Cokes over the total drinks plus Sprites over the total drinks. That's going to be 4 Cokes over 20 plus 5 Sprites over 20. That gives us 9 over 20, which is 45%. Okay, our last problem. A bag contains marbles. 5 blue marbles numbered 1 to 5, 7 yellow marbles numbered 1 to 7. Find the probability of yellow or odd, okay? So on this one, again, we want to find out what were the total number of marbles. So we're going to add the 5 plus the 7, that's 12. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do our yellow marbles over our total because it's asking us for yellow here. We're going to add to it the odd marbles over the total. And then we're going to subtract the yellow odd marbles because they're counted both places right here, okay? So it says we have 7 yellow marbles, so that's going to be 7 over 12. If we talk about odds, we have 1, 3, and 5, and then we have 1, 3, 5, and 7. So that's also going to be 7. So that's going to be 7 over 12 plus 7 over 12. And then if we just talk about the yellow odd numbers, that's 1, 3, 5, and 7. So that's 4 of them. So we're going to, this would be 14 minus 4 would be 10 over 2. That reduces to be 5 over 6, which is 83.3%. So if you guys still have questions, you need to go to the Zoom sessions at 1 o'clock on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of this week. Your final is Thursday. So be prepared because it's your last chance to change your grade.